Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Not much really changed over the holidays. We saw, as we've discussed at great length this morning, the migrant drop-offs continue in Chicagoland, extending out to the suburbs and exurbs. We saw the violence continue unabated in Chicago. Also something extending to the suburbs and exurbs. And we've seen the pro-Hamas protesters occupying the access to modes of transportation from roadways to airports over the holidays as well.
The day before, on the eve of Christmas Eve, they shut down I-90 into O'Hare. I thought, if I was in that line, I don't know what I would have done. But and then they were charging up the hill with a Palestinian flag, and there was a Hamas flag. Like, what? Arrest them now. People are trying to drop loved ones off at the airport and pick up loved ones that were coming home for college.
At JFK and other airports as well. This is the New Republic's take on where things stand in the Middle East. A piece by Hafiz Rashid, New Republic, so this is one of the outlets of record for the new Marxists, in my view. The headline, Benjamin Netanyahu is the war criminal of the year. Experts aren't mincing words about the Israeli leader's brutal and disproportionate response to the October 7th Hamas attacks. And, of course, that's a view that apparently is held somewhat widely within the State Department of the big guys administration. Thus, this push and pull about exactly the messaging from the U.S. to Netanyahu as to Israel's campaign to eradicate said terrorist organization, Hamas. But what does that say about where the left is and continues to be? And I'm not just talking about these mostly ill-informed and overeducated young people on college campuses who then spread out into the world and lay down on expressways and in front of airport terminals. I'm talking about the alleged thinking class of the left, as exemplified by the staff at the New Republic. What does that say? For more on that question and others, please be joined by Eugene Kontorovich, head of the International Law Department at the Colette Policy Forum, which is a Jerusalem think tank, professor at George Mason University's Scalia Law School as well. Professor Kontorovich, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks. Yeah.
What about that New Republic headline? Bibi is the war criminal of the year.
There's a horrible exercise of projection in trying to blame and victim blaming, in trying to blame Israel, for exactly what's been done to it. That is to say, the Hamas invasion of Israel on October 7th, accompanied by massive purposeful killing of civilians, burning families alive together, decapitations, and sexual brutality that can't even be described on a family radio station, is clearly one of the greatest war crimes that's occurred in a Western country in modern memory. And so the instinctive instinct of those who think that only so-called oppressed peoples, of which Jews are not entitled to count themselves, can be victims, is to blame, of course, the victim, which is in this case Israel. And to say that Israel, the victim of these great war crimes, is in fact the perpetrator. And that lets you change the subject from October 7th. And of course, it's baseless. Israel has fought the most careful and the most precise war of any army fighting in an urban situation. Of the maybe 20,000 casualties, up to half of them are Hamas, despite Hamas doing everything they can to maximize civilian casualties. That is better than America has ever achieved in urban combat.
Oh, can we believe those numbers?
We can't know them precisely. We do know that Israel, claims that it has killed, a week ago, maybe 8,000, probably now 9,000 Hamas fighters, which means that the number of civilian dead will be, the total number of dead will be greater than that. If it is 20,000, that's a miracle, because typically, ratios of military to civilians is 1 to 3 or worse in urban conflict, and of course Hamas is doing everything it can to run up the death toll of its own civilians to turn world opinion against Israel. And I think basically what I would say about the New Republic headline is the New Republic headline is in a sense the reason civilians are getting killed in Gaza. Because the reason civilians are getting killed in Gaza is Hamas is putting them in harm's way. Hamas is hiding behind them, knowing that it will awake the sympathy of Western progressives. And the New Republic is rewarding that strategy, meaning Hamas is going to double down on it.
You talk about victim blaming. It's an interesting aspect of this discussion. Barton Swaim had a good piece over the holidays in the Wall Street Journal connecting quote-unquote anti-racism, the identity politics of the Ibram Kendis and Ta-Nehisi Coates of the world, and thus the left, the race identity politics, to anti-Semitism. And he talks about the need to blame someone. This is not the first experience where the Jews have been blamed, the need to blame someone. As Swaim writes, past eruptions of anti-Semitism usually erode from the need to blame someone, anyone, for the cataclysmic failures of a ruling political class. In Russia in the 1880s and 90s, malcontents equated Jews with Marxists and communists, blamed them for political instability. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, the 1903 forgery purporting to reveal a Jewish conspiracy to rule the globe, was a gift to any people wishing to account for its ruin without self-criticism. Germans after World War I sought a reason for their military humiliation and economic immiseration, and we know where that went, just to cite two examples. And so here we have another example of this, and it's sort of an extension of, as Swaim argues, demonizing people because they're successful, which is the same thing that the reparation sort of anti-racist crowd do.
Yeah, I think in this case there is some impulse amongst progressives to blame Israel, because the only alternative is, of course, to blame the Palestinians. And that would mean blaming what they, I think it's nonsense. Jews and Arabs are racially identical, but all Caucasians, but they see them as some kind of different race or oppressed people. And in the woke Bible, the oppressed can do no wrong. So it's a category thing. The Palestinians wound up in the register of recognized oppressed peoples, which means even when they burn mothers and children alive together, they must be the ones who are suffering.
Do you think that we're getting the requisite cultural pushback that meets the moment when it comes to what we've seen on college campuses, particularly the quote-unquote elite colleges or status colleges, what we're seeing from leftist media like we're talking about with the New Republic, what we're seeing from the members of Congress like Rashida Tlaib? Are we getting the requisite cultural pushback that is proportional to the threat that's being presented?
I think there are different levels of threat. The New Republic is a niche intellectual journal, which doesn't pose much of a threat. It does seem to be the case that the Democratic Party can harbor small but not insignificant caucus of genocide apologists and not feel the need to discipline them or expel them. And Hamas is the ISIS of the region. It is the new ISIS. And to imagine if Republicans justified or celebrated the Ku Klux Klan, I cannot imagine they would stay long in Congress. So there's some kind of immunity that they get. On the other hand, much of the Democratic Party has reacted positively, and I think the center of the Democratic Party is in a good place on this. But they seem completely unable to deal with or discipline their progressive flank. As for the colleges, these so-called elite institutions, these legacy institutions, have been revealed to be massive frauds, both on a moral level and in the case of Harvard, which apparently has no problem with a serial plagiarist as president, frauds on a very literal level. Pushback. It's not enough to simply see what they've done wrong. People need to be ready for an alternative. And the real question is whether all those who are disgusted with Harvard would take the next step of, not sending their children there, or not applying there, or not being impressed by it. So, I think we're at the stage of being horrified by these institutions, but a correction will only come when we move on to the stage of seeing that they're in fact not necessary. There are better ways to spend 4 years of one's life. That is going to take, I think, a significant psychological adjustment on the part of the nation's elites.
He is Eugene Kontorovich, head of the International Law Department at the Colette Policy Forum, which is a think tank in Jerusalem, and a professor at George Mason University's Scalia Law School. Professor Kontorovich, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great pleasure, Dan. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.